Now, Paul, an apostle, apo from, apostatos, sent, one sent from. And Paul here, as in the Ephesian letter, the similarity of the expressions that he uses are almost so identical that some students have believed that the Colossian letter and the Ephesian letter were written at the same time. And I have that impression. But he addresses them in the Ephesian letter. He said, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God. And in this Colossian letter, he says, Paul, an apostle by the will of God. Both expressions, the fact that he was an apostle. He was one that was sent of God. God had to make a decision. The decision was to God, who made that decision that Paul should go to Colossia. Some students have said that Paul was never there because he said they heard of their faith, heard of their works there. As in the Roman letter, Paul said that he had heard their faith, their faith had been scattered abroad. But in this Colossian letter, he expressed himself, he said, by the will of God. It is God's will. God had made a decision. And this is after the death and the burial of Christ. It is the will of God from the throne room. Come on. What an awesome responsibility is a man to have orders from God to do something. You can fail to do what the boss tells you to do and get by in this life. You can fail to do what humanity does and get by. But when you start dealing with God, who controls everything in life, you have a responsibility to Him. Paul felt the keenness of this responsibility. Paul, an apostle, I'm God sent. The fact that he was God sent is the greatest evidence of the success of the ministry. Paul was sent. And wherever he traveled, he was sent of God to the heathen world. It had been predestined of God that someone should be sent to the Gentile world. And that someone was Paul. Like Jeremiah in the Old Testament. The expression is found that God knew him from the world. It does not indicate the doctrine that God chose Jeremiah in the womb of his mother. No. But it indicates the doctrine that God had to have a prophet to warn Israel of pending judgment. And that from the time he was born, God had purposed and predetermined that a prophet should warn Israel of pending judgment. God's always had his man at the right time, at the right moment, the right place. I know that in my life. I know that in my life. And I've been very sensitive to what God wanted me to do and where he wanted to send me. Anybody ever told me that I went out to Berkeley, California? Are you kidding? Had my head beat in? My brother was secretary and treasurer of the FL-CIO. He thought I was a religious fanatic. Said, here you are preaching to 10 and 20,000 people, almost becoming as popular as Billy Graham, preaching to mass crowds all over wherever you went. What do? You give up the mass crowds, you give up your staff, you give up the 72 people that were working with you and under you to go out to the most vicious campus this country had, put you in the hospital 12 times, blind you, do everything they could but kill you. You're a religious fanatic. Much of the devil tried me Every day in the morning, I'd go to the campus with the thought that I may not live through the day with a constant threat of a life. Threatened by Hell's Angels, threatened by Black Panthers, threatened by communists, threatened by socialists. And the whole crowd hated my guts. Now I love the poor miserable bunch.
Oh, boy.
But God kept me there and put me there for a purpose, to do a work, to do a job. I'm reminded of what happened when I went in the court to plead the cause of a man that had beat me up. The judge said, "Hubert, I'm tired of this." He said, "You go out there and get beat up, they arrest the man and bring him to court, then you come up here in the court and plead his cause." He said, "I'm tired of it." He said, I said, "Your Honor, you are not being beaten. Why should you complain?" He said, I tell you right now, I wouldn't want to have you a job. Paul was sent. Notice the congregation didn't choose him. They didn't send for Paul. Oh, how that rubs the fur wrong way with me. Today, much of the ministry that pastor churches today, they get a call from some other church to come and pastor our church. Come on. And there's enough money there, the call is strong and loud in some cases. It's a bigger state of prestige and position if there's a large crowd and there's a lot of fat pocketbook to be gained out of it. They suddenly feel the urge to call of God on that heart. But if a small-sized church would call them to come there and preach, who do you think I am? The church at Colossia did not send for Paul. God sent him there. I like it for a man to stay under God's orders. The Bible declares the steps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord. Don't you step until he gives the orders. Paul remained in the will of God. That's the most important thing. He had a high position. He was, my brother, he was a member of the Sanhedrin and belonged to the most elite group of the Sanhedrin, the council of the ancients, high official in the government of Israel. He was to lose all that. He was separated from his mother's womb, and he was exalted in the Jewish religion above his equal. But it pleased God to separate him from his mother's womb and reveal his son in him. Paul declares in Colossians that he was separated by Romans, he was separated by the gospel. And he said, which was promised for the prophets aforehand. And he said that concerning his son Jesus, who was made of the seed of David according to the flesh, and declared to be the Son of God with power by the resurrection of the grave, of whom we received grace and apostleship. He received apostleship from the throne room. God made him apostle when he used to be an enemy. I like that. Paul was a rebel against the church and against God. But God got a hold of him and he couldn't stop.